Hi guys, now in this week's segment of F.I.Y, Fix It Yourself, we are going to, well, share with you what you need to do in the case of your car overheating. Now, I know that most of the time you guys keep your cars in fairly good nick, but sometimes you're facing a situation where you go like, oh, the temperature is going up. What do I need to do? Okay. First of all, you need to know that when you look at the temperature gauge, most of the time it will hover around the halfway mark. And even if you're caught in traffic jam or after a bout of heavy driving, it'll probably inch up a little bit. But don't worry, that's very normal because it will go down and naturalize itself in due course once you give it some air, or once you have some open road and air starts coming into your engine and the engine cools down a little bit, you will go back into the normal zone. But there are situations where you will see that the needle starts to inch its way up towards the red zone. Now that is the time you should worry. And in most modern cars, when you hit the red zone, you will also get the engine check light come on. So what is the first thing you need to do when these two things happen? Well, it's very simple. Pull over and let the engine cool down and rest itself. And then we need to go up front and check out what's going on under the hood. Righty-ho, let's see what we have under the hood. Now, when your car is overheated, I promise you this place is going to be really messy because you're going to get steam coming out at you. You're going to hear water boiling at some point in the engine, and everything is going to be really hot. So the first thing that you must remember is to not touch anything with your bare hands, as it is an engine bay. It's a hot place to be in, so you don't want to touch anything, especially when the car is overheated. Everybody loves to think that, oh, you need to take off the radiator cap and put in water. No, well, you shouldn't be doing that because this little baby over here is pressurized. If you catch it at the wrong temperature and at the wrong pressure, once you open it, water is going to come rushing at you and you really risk facing some serious injuries. So we recommend that the best thing you do when faced with a situation where your car is overheated is for you to actually just pull over, let the engine cool down and call a tow truck so that your car could be towed to your preferred workshop or even the nearest workshop, because different cars have different setups. So you really don't want to be messing with your cooling system just because you don't know what is the right way of doing things. Now, there are certain things that you could do and should do to prevent your car from overheating, and that is what we're going to focus on over here. Now, this part over here is called the coolant reservoir or the coolant tank to most of us. You must always remember to check that the fluid level in this baby over here is always at its optimum position. This in between the minimum and the maximum level. Now, there are basically, generally speaking, two types of reservoir tanks. The one type is where you cannot take it off, and it is normally positioned towards the side of the engine bay, either on the left or on the right. And the reason why it's on the side is so that you can see from this position over here where the fluid is sitting between the minimum and the maximum level. So those are the types of reservoir tanks that you cannot take off. But in this case, in this Proton Water CPS, the reservoir tank is actually something you can take off. And that's a very convenient thing for you to do. So those are the two marker levels I was talking about earlier. That is the minimum level and that is the maximum level. It should always be in between these two marker points. If your fluid level goes below the minimum level, that means you don't have enough fluids and you run the risk of running your engine dry without any cooling facilities, and it will overheat. Now, if you go over the maximum level, you know what they say, too much of something is never a good thing. That's because you must remember that our our radiator is a pressurized system. So in different temperatures, pressure would actually either take away fluid from this reservoir or put back in here. So if you have something that is too filled up, you are only creating a situation where there is no space for the fluid to flow into this reservoir tank, and therefore you are basically going to mess up the entire pressure within the system itself. So you must always remember to keep your fluids in between these two levels. Now, what fluid are we talking about? The best fluid to use in the reservoir tank, either this type or the type where you cannot take off, is basically distilled water. If you use normal water and water that contains mineral, you run the risk of creating corrosion within the radiator itself. Distilled water do not have any minerals in it, so the risk of having corrosion happening within the radiator is minimized, as well as within the engine area itself is minimized. So which is why we recommend that you use distilled water whenever possible. Now, what about coolants? Now, coolants are basically supposed to stop the fluids within your cooling system from freezing. So that is essential in cold climate countries. In Malaysia, it's not really necessary. But another thing that coolants does is that it increases the boiling point from, say, 100 degrees Celsius before water starts to boil to about 120 within this pressurized system. So it again reduces the risk of the car overheating because your boiling point is now edged up higher. And the good mixed ratio for coolant with normal water in the cooling system is 50-50. 50% coolant and 50% water. And you should not have only coolant in there because that just does not work. Do not do that. Okay, now once you've already got your coolant reservoir, or rather coolant tank in, everything should be good to go. And all you need to do is close the hood and go off on your journey. Now, those are some of the preventive measures that you should be taking. We also recommend that you change not only the coolant liquid or fluids, but all the liquids and fluids that are in your car every 40,000 kilometers. That includes the power steering fluid, the brake fluid, as well as the coolant and also the water in the radiator system, and not to mention, of course, the engine oil. So those things need to be changed every 40,000 kilometers. Now, if you do that religiously, your car will be in pretty good nick for a very long time. So that's all you need to know for this episode of Fix It Yourself. We hope you will not be facing any of those situations that we mentioned earlier, and safe journey.